Hello, everyone. It's about 7:50, but in the chat, just tell us what you've done with your day. I'm very interested in what people are doing all day these days. Homework, nice. Oh, great. You guys are so responsible. I love it. Study all day. Studying bio all day. Well, now here's a nice, switch over. Movies. What's a good movie to watch, Martha? Good. That's a classic. Well, it's a classic for you guys' generation. Nice. Late in bed. It's so interesting. This is such a crazy time. I'm just wondering how people are feeling. So we're going to start off. I am going to talk about poetry analysis, thesis, and introduction today. I'm Candace Moore, and I'll be your guide this evening through poetry analysis and thesis and introduction. But I also just want this is the first AP Lit stream we've had since the big news about the exam. So I don't know. And then also just, this time we're in, and people are in various states of isolation and quarantine. Some people have shelter in place mandates. Some people have shelter in place recommendations. So it's just good to have somewhere, you can come, something that's the same. Fiveable's still here every Monday at 8 p.m. So, AP Lit is here. Fiveable's still here 24/7. So let's get going. So again, we're keeping our same schedule right now. Mondays, math and English. So I hope you don't take statistics, but if you take calculus, that's in an hour. I don't know if there's a calculus stream today. Tuesdays are the social sciences, Wednesdays the hard sciences, and Thursdays are history. And again, all live streams and replays are free. So that's something to know. Also, just to keep you updated, there are constant day streams. AP Lit doesn't have any day streams yet, but we're going to get those going, having some practice, some conversations, just to keep you motivated. And also just so that you're not studying by yourself, just keep that community going. Upcoming, we have on the 30th, evidence and commentary to follow up with this stream. So that's going to be me, and I'm going to actually use the same text, I think. So it'll really be a part 2 to this stream tonight. April 6th will be Poetry, Form, and Function with Laura Walton. She did a Poetry, Form, and Function part 1 last semester, so she's going to dive a little deeper. And then April 13th will be Commentary and Sophistication. So we'll get into kind of what that looks like, how you can get some sophistication in your commentary, and just some FAQs. So we're going to continue working in the essays as we know they are. So in that vein, Fiveable, follow it, be here. Slack is jumping right now. I know that people are on Intercom and Discord and all sorts of other things that are keeping our Fiveable community tight. So that's awesome. We've had so many people come and join and be a part of this that a lot of you have been a part of for months, if not years. I know that when I come here on Monday nights, I see some of the same people, and that's nice to see. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the exam, about the updates, what it might be, what we know, what we don't know. And then we're going to do some poetry practice with thesis. We're going to read a poem together and develop our theses. It's a good poem because there are a lot of ways to look at it and a lot of devices in it. So we're all going to try to come up with theses, and they may not be the same, but they will all be great. And then we're going to talk just briefly about an introduction. So in case you were not up to date, just looking at this new exam situation. So there's a lot of questions, but here's what we do know. And that is this year that students are going to take a 45-minute online exam at home. So that gives some people pause. It gives some people relief. I don't know. If you want, you can just drop in a reaction there. Like, how are you feeling about the AP Lit exam in particular, being a 45-minute exam that you take at home? How does that make you feel? So, right. Yeah. So some people are like, yeah, okay, cool. Let's do it. And there's a lot of feelings, and they're all completely valid. Like nobody in the chat so far seems to be feeling like, oh, okay, no sweat. But also so that's a really good question, Urena. We don't know yet. We know that it's going to be 45 minutes. We know that there won't be any multiple choice. And we know that in every subject, the College Board is saying, we're going to cover the skills that people have covered by early March. Well, we know that in AP Lit, the units are by standards, right? But those standards spiral and they rotate. I mean, they scaffold and they spiral. So there were actually no standards. There are no AP Lit standards in units 8 and 9 that weren't in units 1 through 7, which means that it could be anything. We don't really know. I'm also guessing that it's going to be one essay. I think that they're going to choose one essay. I don't know what they'll choose. Perhaps it will be Q3, the literary argument essay, because they feel like every AP Lit class has read a book. And so every AP Lit student would be able to write about a novel. They could. So I also had that thought, Selena, that FRQ is the only one that did 3 units. And so, I mean, FRQ 2 is the only one that did 3 units. So I thought that might be because the units went in that, they went in a cycle. It was like 2, 2, 1, 3, right? Over 3, it was supposed to be 3 times, and then we got through 7. So I did have that thought that it could be FRQ 2, which would be prose analysis. And then I also had the thought that it could be poetry, because poetry, because I definitely, yes, I agree that 3 is easier to plagiarize. And 2 is harder to plagiarize if they choose something obscure, which they, usually have some obscure prose passages, especially. I think maybe it depends on what they had planned for the test this year. So, maybe they are going to look again at the poem and the prose passage and decide which they think. And then I had this crazy thought that maybe they were going to change the requirements and have not a full essay on 2 passages, like 1 prose and 1 poetry. So I don't know. I think that would be, I don't know, tough. I think it's hard enough to write an essay in 40 minutes. It's going to be even tougher to write an essay in 20 minutes. I don't know. Why? I don't know. Why do you say you think they couldn't do that? Have 2 pieces? Yes, I think that's true. I think that they would take into consideration that teachers and students have practiced all year for 40-minute essays, but also, teachers and students have practiced multiple choice as well. I think that I would be really excited to have no multiple choice, because I'm not a strong multiple choice test taker, because I feel like I'm definitely a lit person. Like I could really explain how it's a lot of those answers. Welcome. So I think that they will tell us. I think definitely for the language exams, they will tell us exactly which FRQ it's going to be. I was thinking about Lang also. I guess they can feel pretty safe that it won't be synthesis, I think. But lit, I don't know. So we'll wait and see. And in the meantime, over here in Fiveable, we're just going to continue to have the streams that we were having because we just want to practice composition. Like, we know that it's going to be some kind of essay. And even though I did have that thought about it being a shorter response, I really don't think that that's very likely. Although I wonder if options is going to be something that they have where you can choose. You can choose between poetry and prose. I honestly don't know. Sometimes I just sit and think about all the different ways that they could come up with something new, or give us something we've been using for the year or for years. So I just wanted to, give us an opportunity to talk about that. Yes, so they'll tell us which type, right? They'll tell us which question type by April 3rd. But of course, we won't get a prompt. We'll just be able to say, okay, well, let's only practice prose, or let's only practice poetry. So we'll wait for that, which here in Atlanta is the beginning of spring break. So that, not that spring break means what it used to, but at least, I don't know, people will still maybe take a week off and just hang out with themselves if they've been working hard. I know that not everybody is even, some districts have what the opposite of mandated. They've told teachers that there's no instruction that can be happening. And so, that's a whole different situation. And some people are doing virtual learning, and some people will start virtual learning later. So everybody's just different. But so we just want to, here at Fiveable, we want to just keep giving you opportunities to practice, opportunities to review, opportunities to study. But I did just want to acknowledge all the uncertainty, and also say that if you are or know someone who has digital limitations, that is expecting to have some trouble studying, learning, or taking the test, then definitely let Fiveable know, because we're trying to address some of those things. Also want to say that cram passes went on sale today. So cram passes are going to be a completely separate path of study that will start next week and continue through the test whenever the test happens. They did say that there will be 2 different test dates. So I guess through both, just depending on what people are doing. And, lots of schools were shutting down for 2 weeks initially and are extending them. And then now there are cities and districts that are ceasing school. They're saying we're not going back to the building. The 2 test dates, I think it's interesting because, schools don't get out at the same time. Like, the school year doesn't end for people all at the same time. I know that my school, regular school, is out late May, like usually right before the Memorial Day holiday here. But that there are other schools that are going mid-June, late June. And so I don't know how much College Board will be taking that into consideration. And I know that our seniors, who are the ones in my school who take AP Lit, they were supposed to be done by the 8th. So they often are finished with classes and have to come back for AP tests. So I don't know when the test dates will be. I think they'll probably be, I think they won't be the 2 weeks that they usually are, those first 2 weeks of May, those first 2 full weeks of May. I think maybe they'll be the next 2 weeks, maybe mid-May and then late May into early June. That's just my guess. But I think that originally College Board was thinking people will be 2 or 3 weeks behind because they will have been out for 2 or 3 weeks. But now that people are out indefinitely or have announced that they're not going to be returning to the building. And then some people are not teaching, but also not returning. So it's just, there are so many different things, but I'm thinking it's going to be mid-May and then late May, maybe into June. And I know that they've said that if people now, because of this, choose not to, that they will refund, which is not, hasn't been their practice, their normal practice. So I don't know how many people are going to change their minds. I just know, there are so many people who are just, needing or desiring the opportunity to earn college credit through AP exams. And so they won't necessarily want to give up that opportunity. Okay. So any other thoughts about this new exam, this 45-minute exam? It's quite okay to be a little anxious about it. I think we just have to keep practicing writing, making arguments, and defending them until April 3rd at least. And then we'll check back in and see how that goes. Just a quick question. I'm just wondering, where is everyone? Where in the world are we? Since the exam will probably be FRQ 2, it would be better to study more literary devices. This is an interesting comment. Everybody's in Bolivia or Tennessee, California. Okay. Texas. That's a good question. I think it's never a bad idea to study literary devices. I think that's a thing. I think if it's one or two, we would need devices. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. That's where I'm living right now. Yeah, that's where I'm broadcasting from. Okay, so let's talk about poetry, thesis, and introduction. I wanted to make today really kind of lax, like loose-ish, just a chance to practice. So, so put your thinking caps on. And so we're all going to try to end up with a thesis and an introduction. So I'm going to try to talk less, which means that we will, maybe have some moments of silence. I have some music ready. So if you're a music while you think person, say so. And then if if there are a lot of like, no, please give me silence, then I won't play it. All right, so introductions. So this is Juggling the World, because the introduction samples that I have are from the year that the College Board used the poem, The Juggler, and we're not going to look at that poem. We're just going to look at these introductions. So the prompt that year, 2016, now I'm confusing myself. It might have been 2016 or 2017, said, read carefully the following poem by Richard Wilbur, first published in 1949. So that's a little background. It gives us a little bit of grounding, not too old, but not very, very new, modern, but not contemporary. Then write an essay in which you analyze how the speaker describes the juggler and what that description reveals about the speaker. So we know from any prompt deconstruction practice or fiveable stream that we're looking for this structural element, like a structural or thematic element that we're trying to analyze, and that's poetry and prose. So those things go for Q1 and Q2. And so we're looking for how the speaker describes the juggler and what that description reveals about the speaker. And so sometimes what happens in the Q2 prompts is that you're looking at this poem, but you're looking for two things that work together. If you were in the Q2 evidence and commentary stream that I had a couple weeks ago, it was the same kind of idea. It was the Zora Neale Hurston prompt, where it was how the author characterizes a town and the people who live in it. So those are kind of tricky because you have to make sure that you're getting all the parts of all the things. And so we're always looking for complexity. So we're looking for two sides anyway. And so in this case, we're looking for two sides of two things, or maybe those things are the complexity. So we're looking for aspects that work kind of against each other, that contradict each other, create some conflict and tension. So analyze how the speaker describes the juggler and what that description reveals about the speaker. And so in our thesis, we're going to create this line of reasoning that we're going to set up so that we can defend it. And so that thesis needs to address every piece of that prompt. So this is an old prompt, and I included this because, not because it will be there for you, but because I want you to see how the prompt wording compares to these two theses. So you may wish to consider poetic elements such as imagery, figurative language, and tone. And so we do know that what we used to know about the exam was that it wouldn't give you poetic elements. It will say, it puts that poetic element piece into the task, analyze how the author uses poetic elements to describe the juggler and what that description says about the speaker. And so, but they used to give you these pieces, and they actually sometimes work against students' writing. And so that's why they've taken them out. And so it makes it very easy to, when they give you the elements, it makes it very easy to repeat those elements as your thesis. And so now I think it's going to be easier to set yourself up for analysis, because you can avoid falling into the trap. The trap of just kind of parroting. So so that's the thing. But I just wanted to show you that that's what it was, so that you could see how well these two individuals have responded to that thesis. So here's one of the examples. And so this is the whole introduction. This is the whole first paragraph in this example. And so has anybody read this poem, The Juggler, or worked with this prompt? Okay, good. Awesome. So I didn't want to, awesome. So the thing is, it's good that you have it, because I don't want you to get, just for example's sake, just looking at the pieces of a thesis and an introduction, I don't want you to get caught up in whether or not it's analyzing the poem accurately. I really just want you to look at the pieces that are present in these two introductions. So good. You don't have any of your own analysis to verify or not. Within the poem Juggler by Richard Wilbur, the speaker depicts a juggler's act and highlights how much it brings up the audience's spirits, the speaker among those entertained by the juggling brilliance. Through the utilization of frequent alliteration and somewhat off-kilter rhyme, as well as diction evoking an almost spiritual level of power in reference to the juggler, the speaker creates an image of a juggler managing to overcome gravity, to lift spirits as well as objects, and reveals their own inability to overcome dull, monotonous days forever lacking brilliance. What do you think about that? What do you, according to your understanding of a thesis, what did this person do well? Everything, okay? It's complex. Tell me how, Julia. What do you see? What sides do you see that this person has given? It's got devices, yes. Thorough, definitely thorough. It's not general. Good word choice, right? They mention diction, but also the writer's diction here is strong. It has a deeper meaning. Yes, that we're pushing into sophistication with that there, right? It doesn't just list them, it explains them. Yes. So what are the devices that this writer is going to discuss? Alliteration, yes. Diction. Rhyme. So Lucy, so you're pushing into, I think that maybe not as a device, shame. Oh, okay. But there's, okay. So yes, rhyme. And so I was wondering if that was a typo or if that was some analysis there. But I do think that it's pushing into that analysis. And so when we talk about, so that was kind of a, not a Freudian slip, but like an intellectual slip where you actually were saying the right thing, but not yet. So when we look at the devices that are established here, we know that they have an understanding. So if we look, the elements in the prompt are imagery, figurative language, and tone. And this person didn't use those, right? Or at least when he did talk about figurative language, he specified the figurative language. And so that's how you know that the analysis, that this person is actually ready to analyze this poem, and that they're not leaning on those elements that were given. And so I think that's why College Board has ceased to give any options, because they want to make sure that you don't lean on them. Okay, so we have devices, which we know is what we're looking for. He says that he uses alliteration, rhyme, diction, and then kind of implies imagery, creates an image, but doesn't say that that's something that he's going to analyze outright. And so all of this, according to the writer of this thesis, those devices create what? So we're looking for how the speaker describes the juggler and what that description reveals about the speaker. And so what is the writer's interpretation of what it reveals about the speaker? Right. So we have that the very end. Okay, so this is good. I think that it pushes past, so it does say that the speaker creates an image, but that doesn't reveal anything. That doesn't characterize the speaker so much, right? So we're looking for what it reveals about the speaker as opposed to what the speaker does. So we know that all of these are authorial choices. And so by creating a speaker, the author allows that creator to create the speaker to create an image. But I think that what it really pushes into is what the speaker feels about himself. Exactly. Right. So Julia said it earlier, the speaker's inability to get through dark emotions. And then, yes, Anisha reveals their inability to overcome dull, monotonous days forever, right? Sadness, right? So this speaker feels a way about him or herself due to the juggler's brilliance, right? And so it says, this juggler is so brilliant that it makes me feel bad about myself, which is sad. But sees that his own days, his own days lack brilliance. The speaker has obscure emotions. You might, right? And so again, we're not reading the poem. And so we can't even say whether or not this is right. We can just say whether or not it addresses the prompt. Okay, so let's look at another one. And so this person responding to the same prompt, trying to establish how the speaker describes the juggler and what that description reveals about the speaker. In poetry, devices such as imagery, figurative language, and tone establishes the speaker or author's attitude of the subject. Richard Wilbur's poem Juggler utilizes several elements to describe the juggler and provide insight on the speaker, elements such as the visual imagery of the juggler and his balls, Figurative language, the personification of the balls interacting with the juggler. And tone, the playful mood of the first two stanzas into the awe of the last three. So here again, what has this writer done well? So I like to say that the AP exam is like scoring gymnastics as opposed to scoring basketball, because they take off. You start with 100, right? We're looking at what they do well. And so instead of building a score, you're really kind of losing from not having. So what have they done well? It identifies devices. It does, right? We see these devices. Are they the same devices as the prompt? Right. And so we know that just the fact that this person lists the same three devices as the prompt means that this person is probably not as strong as in their analysis, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a thesis. Because what this person was able to do is figure out what happens. Like someone said, explains all their devices. Yes, right? So they did figure out where those three devices are. And we're able to give some interpretation of those devices and even get specific, the imagery of these things, personification, as opposed to just saying, figurative language, and then names the tone as playful. So it is more cookie cutter. It is more general, but it still does give the devices and what the devices are. Does it establish a line of reasoning about the description of the juggler and what that description reveals about the speaker? Is there anyone who thinks maybe it does a little bit? Is there anyone who can find a way that it does reveal a little bit about the juggler and or the speaker? All right. So you're all right. It's not a strong thesis. It definitely is not as strong as the first one. It doesn't have the diction of the first one. It doesn't have the analysis of the first one. It doesn't have the independent analysis of the first one. But it does. Yes, Anna. So yes, right? So we kind of, by explaining the devices, it does start to lean into a little bit, not as clearly with not the same amount of strength, but it's not missing completely. So that last set of parentheses, the playful mood of the first two stanzas into the awe of the last three, that's either the juggler and or the speaker. And so the awe, if the speaker is telling the story and you have interpreted the tone as awe, then that gives you a little bit about the speaker. The speaker is in awe of the juggler, and that either the speaker or the juggler were playful. And so even without reading and knowing whether or not that's right, there's a little bit of analysis there. So it begins, right? And I think the kind of explains it is probably the best way to describe it, because it's not great at all. And so let's look at whether or not it's actually strong. So we've seen this before. Just to remind you what a thesis point needs, right? So to get a point, you respond to the prompt with a thesis that presents a defensible interpretation of the poem. And so that's the biggest umbrella, right? A defensible interpretation of the poem. And a defensible interpretation in response to the prompt. So it could be more than one sentence, right? These are these additional things. So that third bullet in additional notes, for a thesis to be defensible, the poem must include at least minimal evidence that could be used to support that thesis, However, the student need not cite that evidence to earn the thesis point. It could may establish a line of reasoning that structures the essay, but needn't do so. So we're looking for a defensible interpretation in response to the prompt, and that's what earns a point. So I'm going to put them back up with that note, just so we remember that what a thesis needs to do is provide a defensible interpretation in response to the prompt. So which of these gets that point? I would agree. In response to the prompt, the elements are there. We are looking in the thesis specifically. We're looking for the devices and some indication that the writer of the essay knows how the speaker describes the juggler and what that description reveals about the speaker. So that's like 2 and 1, and then this other piece. And both of these have those. And I think we all agree that the second one is not as strong. And the essay that followed it was, as expected, not as strong. The first one on the old scoring got a 9, which means it would get a 6, which means it's got sophistication. It had excellent evidence and commentary, and we see the thesis, right? So it kind of is, you know, usually in my experience, both in class and as a reader, the essay matches the thesis. So that's an interesting way of thinking about it. But I think it's just true. I think your analysis is going to be as strong as your thesis usually, or the thesis is stronger. Like very rarely is the thesis weaker than the analysis. So we acknowledge that that second one was cookie cutter, but I think when it comes to a thesis, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because to cut it with the cookie cutter makes sure that you have everything that goes in the shape of the, you know, thesis. So I think we definitely want to push ourselves to think and write in a sophisticated way to make sure that we convey the complexity with our own writing. But if you hit all those points that are asked of you in the prompt, then you will be able to earn a thesis point. And again, that thesis can be anywhere. Yes, it can be multiple sentences, and it can be anywhere in your essay. We just know that it makes a lot of sense in the beginning. But I can't say enough that you can, okay, so excellent question. Can you get a perfect score with a cookie cutter essay? I think that with this new rubric, it's far more likely to get a higher score with a perfect essay. With a cookie cutter essay, but I don't think that you would get sophistication with a cookie cutter essay. I think that's really going to be the point. So you can have a thesis that hits all the marks. You can have evidence and commentary that hit all the marks. But if you have a cookie cutter essay that really looks like you plugged it into a format that you've been using, it's not going to get you sophistication. Like sophistication is going to come from your style that goes beyond a template. And it's also going to come from your analysis, which is going to go beyond evidence support. Like a cookie cutter essay is not going to have a thread that runs through it that is more than is asked. It's not going to go that kind of extra mile. So would I recommend you only make the thesis one sentence? Sometimes it's just longer than a sentence. You might have the introduction point, but that's at the cost of another. Well, so here's the thing. This new format changes everything, right? So we're looking at something there's no balance anymore, right? So we don't know how to say what would make a 5, except earning a 6 on an essay. So I think that's something to really think about. We used to be able to say, you know, you need this many total points, so you can do better on one essay than another. Or if you're not strong in multiple choice, be really strong in your essays. So I think when we find out what it's going to be, then we're going to talk again about sophistication, because I think that'll make it actually easier to build sophistication. So I think that if you have a cookie cutter essay, you could get 5 points out of 6. Like, that's a possibility. So you would be costing yourself a sophistication point, but that's 1 point out of 6. And I think that it's hard to say how that's going to go with like a new curve. I think they would be more lenient. I think so, but we know that perfect is going to be perfect, right? So just going on the assumption that we're going to be looking at one essay in 45 minutes, that getting 6 points on that essay is going to get you a 5 on the exam. I think we can, you know, but then it's like, how would we, how would it go from there? I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so how can we make an essay less cookie cutter? So let's look at that. To make an essay less cookie cutter, sometimes it's just, so if, as a writer, you're going to have some sort of style. And I think that the cookie cutter, so let's think about maybe not a cookie cutter, because actually let's think about cookies. So if you have, you know, like at Christmas time, you know, we have like sugar cookies and we have cookie cutters, and the cookie cutter will be a shape. And then that shape will be, you know, blank, right? So maybe we have a tree or a snowman or a bell. And so the way you frost it, the way you frost that cookie, if this analogy is not working for you, please let me know. But if you can imagine, you know, like when you're little and you make, you know, you make things in kindergarten or in class, in art class, and everybody's looks different, right? But there's a way for everybody to be right. And so I think to make your essay more bigger than the template, right? It's the frosting, it's those little things. And so it's even things as simple as how you transition into your quotes, how you transition, thank you, how you transition out of your quotes, because somebody could just frost that cookie with white icing and it's a beautiful cookie. Maybe it's an angel, right? It works, it makes sense. But somebody else could add, you know, silver sparkles to their angel, or, you know, have an outline or shading, right? Depending on their icing abilities. And so that's what we're looking for. We're trying to create style, because style is what's going to make your essay less cookie cutter. And so it's going to have the same pieces, but it's going to look, the difference between these two theses, yes, the difference between these two theses is the difference between having a cookie cutter. And so that first person, some of that is just that person's individual vocabulary and lexicon and flow. This person is a great writer. But there are things that you can do. For example, if the second thesis writer, instead of having this list of devices with the parentheticals, if they had used the words in the parentheses to create an adjective, a modifier for the device, then it would have been a stronger, more sophisticated essay. So instead of elements such as visual imagery of the juggler and his balls, like it could have just been by creating images of the juggler and his craft, right? Or even the juggler and his expertise, images of the juggler as opposed to visual imagery of the juggler. Visual imagery of the juggler. And then not to have these parentheses at all, comma, personification of the balls as the juggler, you know, threw them, juggler juggled them, and playful tone of the first two stanzas that shifted into the awe of the last three. That right there, same list, same devices, same understanding, more sophisticated. And so sometimes it's syntax. And so I think it's figuring out, and I think that's where I was going. Oh my goodness, it's 8:45. But figuring out like how to take that template and make sure that you make it yours. So let's do that. And so now next week is definitely going to be a continuation. So please come back next week when we talk about evidence and commentary. And so I'm going to show you this prompt and the poem, and then talk about like where we would go with that thesis. So here's the prompt. In the following poem by Khalil Gibran, 1883 to 1931, the speaker reflects on the consequences of defeat. Read the poem carefully. Then in a well-written essay, analyze how Gibran uses poetic elements and techniques to portray his complex relationship with defeat. So again, we're looking for one thing. That's a nice thing. We're looking for one thing with two sides, just the relationship. We know that there's going to be about consequences. So that's a hint, right? So they're always going to give you the way to look at it. And that's nice. So there's always going to be two different references to what's going on in the poem. That first one is going to tell you what the poem is about. And then the task itself is going to ask you to analyze something specific that happens in the poem. So you know that this is about the consequences of defeat, so you can go in with that. And so your thesis can talk about consequences. Your thesis is going to talk about complex relationship. And so really quickly, before I show you the poem, they do that with passages too. So with the passage, they'll give you just kind of a very short summary of what's happening. Like it's usually in this excerpt from blank. It might tell you the book, it might not. Sometimes it tells you it's the introduction, which helps you. But they're always going to give you a little bit of background that's going to be useful. It might be time, it might be place, it might be context of the passage, right? So they might give you some introduction, tell you what has happened before the passage or what is happening in the passage, but they're going to give you a piece of it so that helps you direct your reading. So we know that this is basically the template. In the blank, the author, and so I like to say adjective plus element, because I think one, everybody wants to be innovative, right? Lots of students spend a lot of time trying to figure out what is nobody else writing about. But you don't have to write about what nobody else writes about. And I've said this in a bunch of streams, you don't have to write about what nobody else is writing about. You just have to write it well. And so if you have an adjective in your thesis, then the reader of your essay is going to know that you know right there. They're going to know that you understand not only what that device is, but what the device is doing, or at least what it's describing. And so if you have adjective plus device, so personification of the balls, as opposed to just figurative language, playful mood that turns to awe, as opposed to tone in the first half of the poem, right? So try to give an indication that you know where you're going. Okay, so sorry. So I'm going to come right back to your question. I see you. So I like to say adjective plus element, modify the element in some way so that the reader knows, and that helps establish your line of reasoning as well. So it's going to portray the prompt element as blank, but yet and that shows complexity. So our basis, our cookie cutter, is in the poem. Khalil Gibran's blank and blank portrays the speaker's relationship with defeat as blank yet blank. Okay, what's kind of impossible? To have two FRQs? I think it's unlikely. Yeah, I know I threw that out there just because I was thinking about it. I was like, what twist could we have here? But I think it's unlikely. So the reason why I think it's unlikely is what someone said earlier, that everybody's been practicing for 40 minutes. And so I think if they had two FRQs, they would limit the expectation of the response. So it would be like, I don't think so. You know, now that I say it out loud, I don't think that's likely at all. That they would have you write 20 minutes worth is what I was thinking. That it would be, yeah, that it would be, that would actually be 2 FRQs. Yeah. We'll find out on April 3rd, and we'll be back here on April 6th to talk about it. Okay. So I think what I would like to do with this last 10 minutes, and I planned for this to be long because I really wanted to have time to talk about the exam and just kind of get everybody, I don't know if it put anybody at ease, but just have an opportunity to talk about it, because I think that helps everything. For me, it does. You know, just if there's something that I'm worried about, it helps just to talk about it. Yeah. So, okay. So this is one of my favorite poems in life, and definitely one of my favorite poems to use for analysis or for practice, because it's loaded with everything. So I'm going to read the poem, and I think we're going to try to create a thesis. And then next week we'll come back to it. And again, you know, you can watch the replay. You don't have to be here live, but I like it when you guys are here live. But I'm not talking out into the ether. But so we'll read the poem, and we'll all try to come up with a thesis, and then, you know, write it down and put it in your pocket until next Monday. And we'll come back and look at it more deeply, talk about introductions, and then talk about evidence and commentary. So Khalil Gibran is also an amazing writer. So look him up if you don't know him, because he just life lessons all over the place. Defeat, my solitude and my aloofness. You are dearer to me than 1,000 triumphs, and sweeter to my heart than all world glory. Defeat, my self-knowledge and my defiance. Through you, I know that I am yet young and swift of foot, and not to be trapped by withering laurels. And in you, I have found aloneness and the joy of being shunned and scorned. Defeat, my shining sword and shield. In your eyes, I have read that to be enthroned is to be enslaved, and to be understood is to be leveled down, and to be grasped is but to reach one's fullness, and like a ripe fruit to fall and be consumed. Defeat, my bold companion. You shall hear my songs and my cries and my silences, and none but you shall speak to me of the beating of wings and urging of seas and of mountains that burn in the night, and you alone shall climb my steep and rocky soul. Defeat, my deathless courage. You and I shall laugh together with the storm, and together we shall dig graves for all that die in us, and we shall stand in the sun with a will, and we shall be dangerous. Okay, let's talk devices. Let's talk devices that show us the complex relationship. Anaphora, repetition, personification. Repetition. Repetition of repetition here. Ooh, a good one. Polysyndeton. Parallelism. Repetition. Should I continue to repeat repetition just for the meta repetition of it? Okay. So we've got a lot. And we don't have to talk about all of those, right? We wouldn't have to write about all of them. So anaphora is one of my favorite things in life. What is a polysyndeton? Anisha, tell us what polysyndeton is. It's where you say and over and over again. And so asyndeton is to not have ands, it's to have a list like with just commas. And then polysyndeton is to have the conjunction. So asyndeton is the opposite. And so you would have I'm going to the store and I'm getting apples, bread, fruit, fries, potatoes, bread, milk. And then polysyndeton was I'm getting apples and bread and fruit and potatoes and tomatoes. Okay, so we don't care about any of this, though. We don't care about any of them unless we know how they help create the relationship. So someone said personification. What is personified? Defeat, right. We know because he's talking to it like it's a person, and we also know because it's capitalized. And we always know if something is capitalized that it doesn't deserve to be capitalized, and we've made a proper noun out of a common noun, and we've got personification. Does anybody know what it's called when you're writing to something that can't hear you, an inanimate or absent object? So illusion's like a reference, right? But you would in an illusion, you would name it. You would say, like Lucifer. So apostrophe, also one of my favorite literary devices. I don't know why. Apostrophe. So here's a new device for you. Apostrophe is when a speaker is addressing an inanimate or absent audience. Twinkle, twinkle, little star is always my go-to example. How I wonder what you are, right? But the star can't hear you. Illusions may be religious, Rebecca. They could be historical. They could be illusions are just inside jokes. Anytime you're talking to someone and assume that they know that you share some sort of expectations or understandings, then you can make an illusion. Does it apply when the speaker talks in second person? Yes. So usually it is going to be in second person. They're going to be talking to the absent you. And so that's happening here. And so we could use that. But again, it's never, ever, 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 ever. I can't say that enough. It's never necessary for you to know what these devices are called. Absolutely not. So if you call it personification and you're writing about how he's talking to defeat, like defeat is a person, that's the same as if you were writing about apostrophe. You never have to know what it's called. You only have to know what it does. And so if you know polysyndeton, absolutely, let's talk about it. Let's write it down and let's have that, term in our lexicon. But if you don't, you just know that he's repeating and that's fine. And it's good. And it's great. And it could be sophisticated. See what I did there? I used the polysyndeton to talk about. Okay. All right. So we've got these. How would somebody throw out, how would you describe this speaker's relationship with defeat? How does the speaker feel about defeat? Optimistic. Okay. Doesn't mind. Like they know each other. If you had to say on a spectrum, right, yes. So you're in Santiago, absolutely. So if you had to say on a spectrum from like hating defeat, which most people do, right? Hating defeat to loving defeat. If hating defeat is a 1 and loving defeat is a 10, where is this person? Where's the speaker? Okay, 6, 10, right? So it's on that upper half, right? So what lines though tell you that? How does he talk? So the familiar, I think, is good. I think that's a good way to talk about, a good word to use, right? To talk about how he talks to defeat, right? Defeat. And so the last stanza, what about it, Martha? The last stanza. Yes, right? Sandra, we're going to laugh together with the storm, and we're going to stand in the sun with a will. We're going to be dangerous, you and me, defeat. Like we're going to be a force to be reckoned with, right? Thanks, Mr. Casa. Yeah, my deathless courage, right? That laugh together in the storm, that's a thing. Like that's what you do with your ride or dies. Like you don't laugh together in the storm with any old acquaintance. Defeat is his good friend, right? We're going through these things, and somebody earlier, deathless courage, yes, right? Defeat gives me a courage. Santiago earlier said he sees it as a way to grow. Absolutely, right? It's a teaching moment. He's got admiration for defeat, as though defeat helps him. So, polysyndeton, whose word was that? Anisha. So, polysyndeton, where do you see it? And I'm going to say that Anisha and Anisha and Anisha. Anisha, you said polysyndeton and you said anaphora. So let's decide which device do you think is stronger for what he does here? The anaphora or the polysyndeton? Do you think of it more as repeated phrases or as a list that make up a whole idea? Okay, so anaphora. So there are two things that the three, well, I don't know why I said two. So these last four stanzas, they all have 3 to 4 lines that start with and. And that third stanza, I'm really going to get in there next week. But to be enthroned is to be enslaved. What? That to be understood is to be leveled down. What? Like, this is why this is one of my favorites, because these ideas, these paradoxical ideas, that to be enthroned is to be enslaved, and you learn that from defeat, like that defeat taught you by not enthroning you, that when anybody on a throne is actually a slave to the people that enthroned him or her. Okay, it's 9:01. And you might be going to calculus, and you might be going to bed, and you might have a date. Whatever it is, I don't want to keep you over this hour, but I would like for you to throw in the chat before we're done the complexity of the speaker's relationship with defeat. So what is it? What are the two sides of the speaker's relationship with defeat? You can just throw in a phrase. It's blank yet blank. It's this, but also that. And then we'll be done. Nice. Yes, Anna. That's almost exactly what I said. Yes. So helps us learn, but sometimes hurts. If we're going to say like a mentor, yes, good, right? Like a mentor, but what? And some of this is just the complexity of our natural understanding of defeat. Like, we don't usually like it. So it's complex that he likes it at all. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking. And I am officially done. We're going to stay right. We're going to let it go right there. If you have, so I'm going to hold on to your responses. So please come back next week, because I'll have what you put in the chat. And so we can start there and keep this party going. If you didn't get anything in the chat, then feel free to hang out for a minute and try to capture your thoughts while they're fresh. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I love it when you're here to talk to me. And come back next week for evidence and commentary. Yes, wash your hands and don't touch your face, like I caught myself doing a few times. Thanks for dropping by, Mr. Kossoff. Thank you, as always. Thanks for being my partner, Miss Skelly. Awesome. Awesome. I don't know gold on that damn thing. And the real thing is, where's my cheese? Where's my cheese at the front? Come on, who cut the cheese? Who dropped it? Oh, we're supposed to have for breakfast, right? I mean, this morning. Okay. I need to do my hair. So that's going to be oh, Amanda. What's happening there? I'm doing all things. I'm listening to my things. I'm not eating that at 9:30. But what am I eating at 9:30? What's the problem?